Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Greetings from the United States. Actually, I'm recording this on Monday evening, and you all are 13 hours ahead of my time. So, anyway, I hope you're doing well. And I want to talk tonight about obsessive compulsive disorder. And this is a very interesting mental health disorder. And as with all of the other mental health topics that I have done, there are parts that overlap. And as we begin to see how much depression, anxiety, family history, lots of factors that can go into our mental health and our thinking, our behavior, our brain chemistry. It just goes on and on. And with all the stresses around the world, in your country, in my country, there's the highest rate of mental health ever in America, the United States, and not enough counselors, therapists, even physicians. And the pandemic, COVID, has made mental health issues a lot worse, how it changed life and society. So, as we talk about obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, as its short acronym for, um, you might hear people just casually throw around that term. Oh, I'm OCD. I know here where I live, it's very casual. It comes up in most conversations, and I'd say the majority of the people, whether they're half heartedly joking or they're serious, they might refer to their behavior or their ways as OCD. So tonight we're going to look at it. Of course, it can go deep, but I'm just going to skim the surface. And I would like to divide it up into two sessions. So, just like the last time, I'd like to do an overview and symptoms and causes and risk factors. And then next week, I would like to do more of the diagnosis and treatment. So maybe this will be about 20 minutes. And so, obsessive compulsive disorder. It features a pattern of unwanted or invasive thoughts and fears, which is the obsession part, that lead a person to do repetitive behaviors. Therefore, the repetitive behaviors are the compulsion part. So, obsessive thinking and compulsion, action, or behaviors. These obsessions and compulsions can interfere with our daily activities and life and cause significant distress. And much like the other topics that we've talked about, same thing. If it gets to the point that it starts to really interfere with a person's daily life and functioning, it has gone from mild into more of a moderate, and then, if untreated, more severe. So, a person usually, when they realize these obsessive thoughts that are invasive, that are coming, and they want to try to stop them or ignore them, they try to do these behaviors or actions. And it really, compulsive actions, it really increases distress and anxiety. It makes it rise up. So, despite efforts to ignore or get rid of bothersome thoughts or urges, they keep reoccurring. they keep coming back. And this leads to more ritualistic or distinct patterns of behavior, and it becomes a vicious cycle, therefore called obsessive compulsive disorder. It centers around OCD, centers around certain themes. For example, an excessive fear of getting contaminated by germs. So, to ease the contamination fears, a person may compulsively wash their hands over and over and over until they become chapped or sore. Now, I don't know in your country, but especially since COVID, people wash their hands a lot. And so some of that may just be out of the safety behavior and habit of COVID, or some people may just be really, truly in their minds paranoid and afraid of germs sickness. Um, so if a person you know has OCD, just be aware that they may feel ashamed or embarrassed about the condition. Although here in the States, it has become very common. Like I said at the beginning, people just throw around that word a lot, OCD. But a real mental disorder, it needs treatment, and treatment can be effective, although there's no cure that will completely get rid of it, nor is there any type of prevention. So as we go into this session and next, you will see more of what I'm talking about. So the symptoms. It is interesting to me that with OCD, uh, it is possible to have just the obsession part, intrusive, unwanted thoughts that just keep coming, or only the compulsion symptoms. So a person may or may not realize that the obsessions and compulsions are excessive or unreasonable, but they take up a great deal of time and interfere with daily routine and social, school, or work functioning. So these are some conditions to be aware of. Okay, so what are these obsessions that are repeated, persistent, and unwanted, or urges or images that are intrusive and cause distress or anxiety? They usually are around themes, such as one that I mentioned earlier, fear of contamination. Another one might be doubting and having difficulty tolerating uncertainty about the present, the future, anything. So lots of doubting and uncertainty causing fear. Needing things orderly and symmetrical. So a very moderate or extreme OCD person would just be ritualistic about everything exactly the same way, very meticulous about the order, everything, the uh, stacks or shelves or objects have to be exactly the same space apart, facing the same way. It is extreme. And then the other one is this is more serious and more something to be really concerned about. Some people do have aggressive or horrific thoughts about losing control of all of their fears and anxiety and anger and hurting or harming themselves or others. So, some examples of these obsession signs and symptoms include, um, like I mentioned about germs, fear of being contaminated by touching objects that others have touched, doubts that you've locked the doors or turned off the stove, or just these thoughts that just go and go and go and you can't let go of them. Intense stress when objects aren't orderly or facing a certain way. Images of driving your car or motorcycle or cab or anything into a crowd of people. And I don't know if you've heard, but there's been a lot of terrorist attacks here in the States where, or people that have severe mental illness driving into people. And just recently we had a person drive into migrants from Mexico that were waiting at a bus stop. And sadly, children and adults were killed. So whether that's mental illness or a hate crime or whatever, it's just sometimes OCD people will have those kind of more aggressive, violent thoughts. Thoughts about shouting, obscenities, or acting inappropriate in public. So the thoughts where they imagine themselves acting that out and then the fear sets in. Another one is unpleasant sexual images. Another last one is avoidance of situations that can trigger obsessions, such as going back to the germs, shaking hands. So during COVID, the pandemic here in the States, we were told do not shake hands. And we shake hands greeting people a lot in our culture. And so that people had to get used to not shaking hands during COVID. But someone that has OCD, they do not want to. They want to avoid touching things that are hands or anything that people have touched for the fear and phobia of germs. So those are a few of the examples of the signs and symptoms and themes around obsession. Now let's look at, we're kind of dividing it into two parts. So the obsession part and the compulsion part. And I have sent a brief outline to Chaplain Nato to post for you all to help you follow and take notes. So under the compulsion symptoms, they are repetitive behaviors that a person feels driven mentally, emotionally to do, to perform, to try to overcome this obsession of thoughts. So these repetitive behaviors or mental acts are meant to try to reduce anxiety. But as I've said before, it's not possible to prevent something bad from happening all the time, especially if it's imagined. And so it just spins into this cycle. So a person may make up rules or rituals to follow that help them control anxiety when they're having these obsessive thoughts. So the rules or the boundaries or the rituals help them not to act on the obsessive thoughts or just to try to ignore it or keep it away. Um, what's interesting is sometimes these compulsive acts are so excessive, out of the norm, out of the ordinary, that they're often not realistically related to the problem or the issue that they are intended to help solve or fix. So it's interesting how the compulsion gets going, the obsession. But remember what I said at the beginning, that sometimes you don't have to have both, which was very interesting for me to learn. I had not quite heard or learned about that. And by the way, the information that I'm sharing with you comes from a very important hospital here in the States called Mayo, Mayo Clinic. It's in Rochester, Minnesota. It's world renowned, and so this information and some of the other mental health issues I've talked about has come from the Mayo Clinic. So anyway, back to the themes of compulsive acts. Washing and cleaning, checking, always like double, triple, quadruple checking over and over and over, counting, um, and if you've ever seen anybody out in public, I know there's a guy that comes to the grocery store close by me, and he definitely has a severe OCD, and he will talk out loud and will be counting and just stand there, and you can tell he's in another world, but he does things over and over and over. So counting. The compulsive acts or behavior of orderliness, and having to have everything perfect in order, and sorted and picked up and straightened and organized, and it's just kind of like over the top. And then another theme might be around a very strict, strenuous routine that has to be followed for this person with OCD, because that helps them not get out of control with their anxiety. So a very strict routine. And then a person with OCD needs a lot of assurance, and so they almost demand that assurance. So some more examples of these themes that get carried out in signs and symptoms include hand washing until your skin becomes raw. Can you imagine that? And in the more serious, severe cases of OCD, that might happen. Checking doors repeatedly, just over and over and over, to make sure they're locked. Checking the stove to make sure, or burner, to make sure it's turned off. Of course, all of us want to sometimes double check because we don't want to have a fire or a break-in or anything like that. So it's normal to think, oh, have I done this? And go check once, but not over and over and over. And then counting in certain patterns, ways of counting that is a specific pattern. Right now I can't think of an example of that except for maybe like counting over and over in twos or threes, or I've seen some people do some multiplication in their head that they're doing out loud. And then another sign or symptom would be someone that over organizes, to the perfection. of the store, the sorry, or the house, or the business, or whatever. It just is, you can tell, perfect. And so, but these are just some examples, and I'm sure there are cultural examples for each culture of how this obsessive compulsive disorder will manifest itself. And so you can think about and talk about that, what you see there in your culture. It's interesting when OCD can start to develop. And like some of the other mental health disorders, it usually can begin in the teen years, the young adult years, every once in a while, childhood. There's some children coming to our church that have special needs, and they have the ADHD, they have obsessive compulsive, and what's the other one? Obstinate behavioral disorder. And so it can occur in childhood. Symptoms usually begin gradually, and then they tend to vary as the person gets older, and the degree of how severe it is can be varied in persons. So, but it does mostly stay throughout life for a person who has it. The types of obsessions and compulsions that a person experiences can change over time. The types different types we've talked about just now, but symptoms generally worsen when a person experiences or undergoes stress. Stress is not good. It does terrible things to the mind and the body, and a behavior under stress. It's known that our personalities and our decision making, our attitudes, our response, reactions all regress. So it's very difficult. And I think also as a Christ follower, I think it can produce some guilt. I know it has for me whenever I regress and my thinking, my feeling, my behavior is not what I would want it to be or Christ-like as I would want. But I realize under severe stress, we really go through regression. But concerning OCD, the brain waves, the chemistry in the brain, and then you add the cortical stress hormone, it just really has a negative effect on people with OCD. Let's see, what else? Now, this might be interesting too, that there is a difference between a perfectionist, which is a personality trait, that is someone who requires perfection in their performance, their whatever their outcome, their results. They want perfection. But there is a difference between a perfectionist, which is like a learned behavior trait, personality trait. And those OCD thoughts that occur are different than being a perfectionist, because they aren't simply excessive worries. OCD thoughts aren't simply excessive worries about real problems in your life, or liking to have things clean or arranged in a specific way. They are real to the person with OCD. It is necessary for them to have these patterns and these themes that come out. And so perfectionists are usually people that just strive and excel for perfection for their family, their parents' approval. Maybe they're a firstborn child, and the expectation and responsibility is naturally put on them because they're first in the birth order. So, if a person that you are helping, or anyone in your family or yourself, feel like your quality of life or their quality of life, another person's quality of life, is being affected to a moderate or severe degree, they need to see a doctor or a regular physician or a mental health professional. And they have identified, the professionals, the research people, they have identified three um, possible causes of OCD, because obsessive compulsive disorder is not fully understood, and it doesn't seem to completely go away. So it can be managed and it can be treated if it's mild. But these are the three areas. One is biology. OCD may be a result of changes in the body's own natural chemistry or brain functions. And so it's truly amazing, our brain, the organ that it is, and all the chemistry involved in the electrical impulses, and the different parts of the brain that God designed. But biology can be a factor of OCD as far as a cause. The other one is genetics. Although a specific gene has not been identified, on the genome, they have not identified a specific gene marker that causes OCD, but there could be some genetic or inherent hereditary component. Then learning. Obsessive fears and compulsive behaviors can be learned from watching family members or gradually learned over time. And I don't know if I have said this when we talked about anxiety disorder, but a phrase you can remember is anxiety attracts anxiety. So if you've ever been around people that are very anxious and you're perceptive and observant and you feel it when you're around them, it's just something about how anxiety is almost contagious. And I say that with a smile, but it's really hard, and to not let it affect you. So we have to know when we feel it, and then decide in our own selves how we're going to handle the anxiety that is coming from other people. But much of human behavior is learned. It's learned within cultures, and there may be some brain chemistry or some hereditary mental illness, but a lot is learned, and especially through stress and trauma, when it's not taught, the person is not taught or trained or how to handle it. So you all are doing some very important work in ministry by learning all these things. As we talked about the causes, the risk factors are family history, stressful life events, and sometimes other emotional disorders might interfere with a specific OCD pattern or theme. For example, substance abuse however the body is being acted upon through the drugs and substance, alcohol, drugs, it can cause OCD or make it worse. Anxiety disorders, depression. And so those can overlap and affect OCD. Let's see. So as I mentioned, there's no real prevention that we can do, but we can be aware and learn the symptoms and the signs, and also more just about it, that it causes and risk factors, to make us more aware within our own families, our own self, and those that we are working with. So I look forward to sharing the next month on the diagnosis and treatment. And again, a lot of it has to do with counseling, psychotherapy, support. So you are seeing how mental health covers so much of a person's life, and it's important to get help and support so that God's design and purpose and quality of life will be what He wants as He blesses each one. So God bless you, and I will see you next month. All right, take care. Bye-bye.